let's talk about a blood pressure medication called Telmisartan. It also goes by the name Mycardis. And the reason why I wanted to discuss it is because in the bodybuilding world, historically, Telmisartan's it's been the favored antihypertensive. And it's been that way for several years. Is there something that the bodybuilders know that the medical community doesn't know? Well, let's talk about Telmisartan because it belongs to a group of blood pressure meds, and that group is called the ARBs, or angiotensin receptor blockers, which is also sometimes referred to as the angiotensin II receptor blockers. But before digging deep into possibly why bodybuilders may prefer this medication, it's important that we know the mechanism of action of how Telmisartan works. Okay, to start from the top, anytime you're in a state of decreased fluid volume or decreased sodium levels or decreased perfusion to the kidneys, your kidneys produce what's called renin. Then renin converts a chemical called angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. After renin converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1, angiotensin 1 is then converted into angiotensin 2 by something called angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE, ACE for short. Have you ever heard of the drug lisinopril? You probably have. It's one of the most common drugs. It's been around for decades. Well, that drug belongs to a class of drugs called the ACE inhibitors. And this is the step of the RAAS, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. This is the step that the ACE inhibitors come into play. Essentially, when you take an ACE inhibitor, it interferes with the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. So now that we have angiotensin 2 on board, let's talk about how it can increase blood pressure. So it has several mechanisms of how it does it. The first mechanism is that it increases the release of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex. And aldosterone is a mineralocorticoid that increases the reuptake of sodium, it increases the reuptake of fluid, and it pushes out potassium. Angiotensin 2 also increases systemic vasoconstriction, which therefore that would increase preload and afterload on the heart because now the heart has more resistance to have to pump against. Furthermore, angiotensin 2 also increases oxygen demand on the body and it increases norepinephrine. And this is where ARB drugs such as Telmisartan come into play. So when you bring Telmisartan on board, you're blocking those effects, those deleterious effects that can happen from angiotensin 2. Again, those include increasing oxygen demand on the body, decreased renal perfusion, you're going to block vasoconstriction, and you're also going to mitigate the amount of aldosterone being released. It appears that Telmisartan gets most of its pleiotropic benefits that are beyond blood pressure reduction via acting on the PPAR gamma pathway. Now, it acts on that as a partial agonist, and overall, there's about a 25% overall receptor activation from Telmisartan. Now, by activating the PPAR gamma, what you're doing is you're increasing insulin sensitivity in the body, you're increasing glucose disposal, and you're also possibly going to reduce left ventricular hypertrophy. Not to mention that activation of that pathway has lots of anti-atherosclerotic effects. It's antioxidant, especially in the vascular space, and it can also kind of marginally lower the triglycerides a little bit. This is the same pathway that a prescription diabetes drug called Actos also appears to work through. So to sum it up, Telmisartan, it lowers blood pressure. We know that. It protects your kidneys. We know that. But also it has cardiometabolic benefits, namely through insulin sensitization and glucose disposal.